So, good morning. I'm Radu Miruță, Minister of National Defense in Romania and the Vice Prime Minister for the Romanian government. I think that the messages should be very clear. We are here to act. We are not here to wait. And also, I'm here in order to push our national defense industry in the first rows. Why? Because it's very clear that all the European Union need to scale the production, need to extend the production. And by extending the production, we should and we could do this if we can put in the same room all the capabilities from all the other countries. European Union and the European Commission provided in the meantime some financial instruments, like it is SAFE now, like it was ASAP, but it's very clear that not always only the money can solve the problem, because the main situation and the main constraint is the speed. Speed is the key right now. And in Romania, for example, by using a safe mechanism, we will bring to life some governmental national companies from the defense industry. And once those companies are brought to life and we introduce some new technology in those companies should contribute and could contribute in some European production chain. And by extending the European production chain, it's very clear that we can extend the production for the entire European Union. Yes, inside the European Union, yes, in collaboration with NATO, yes, in strong relation with the United States, but having in mind one very clear aspect. Europe should be able to protect Europe.
What will be your contribution to the Arctic Century?
We'll analyze, it was just announced. We are in the same time on the eastern flank, and we are asking for a fair distribution of resources along the eastern flank. We know how the situation was with Russia on our territories, and I think it's very important to protect the entire border, also the north, also the east, and contributing with everything we can in the zones where the situation is more stringent for those countries. So I think it's a good thing that it was announced that North-centric. We will analyze in the next period how we can contribute also into that North-centric, but the hot point on our side is the eastern flank, but the entire eastern flank from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea.
Do you have any indications that it could cost capabilities to the Eastern Century?
No, I do not have some information for the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. NATO-Treffen. Frühjahr, danach ist er zwar nicht, aber unser Frühjahrs-NATO-Treffen der Verteidigungsminister fokussiert sich zum einen auf das, was jetzt ist, aber auch schon auf den NATO-Gipfel in Ankara. Und die NATO-Länder haben in den letzten 1,5 Jahren deutlich nachgelegt, gerade die Europäer, was ihre Rüstungs- und Verteidigungsausgaben angeht. Deutschland, das wissen Sie, wird alleine in diesem Jahr 108 Milliarden Euro für die Verteidigung ausgeben. Damit bauen wir unsere Fähigkeiten mit hoher Schlagzahl aus. Und ich freue mich sehr, dass das eben auch Auswirkungen hat auf eines unserer wichtigsten multilateralen Kooperationsprojekte, ELSA, European Long Range Strike Approach. Wir steigen ein mit einer Unterzeichnung heute eines Abkommens in die Produktion von Drohnen und Loitering Ammunition mit einer Reichweite von 500 Kilometern. Die werden interoperabel sein, das heißt, wir können gemeinsam warten, beschaffen, üben und weiterentwickeln. Das ist wichtig angesichts der Herausforderungen, die vor uns liegen. Wir zeichnen, wie gesagt, heute eine Vereinbarung dazu und damit steigen wir in die nächste ganz wichtige Phase dieses Projekts ELSA ein. Und damit stärken wir, und darum geht es in diesen Tagen mehr denn je, die europäischen, konventionellen europäischen Abschreckungs- und Verteidigungsfähigkeiten innerhalb der NATO. Ein weiteres Thema heute und in den kommenden Wochen bis zum Gipfel und dort dann selbst auch wird sein, der 360-Grad-Ansatz, den ich immer wieder propagiere, von dem ich immer wieder spreche. Ich glaube, es wird Zeit, dass wir unsere Radarsysteme der NATO in alle Himmelsrichtungen ausrichten, ohne dabei zu vergessen, dass Schwerpunkt natürlich die Ostflanke der NATO bleibt. Daran führt kein Weg vorbei. Aber klar muss eben auch sein, Russland ist in vielen Teilen der Welt unterwegs und Russland sucht die Konfrontation eben auch in anderen Regionen, so wie zum Beispiel in der in den letzten Wochen aus bekannten Gründen zu Recht immer wieder im Gespräch befindlichen Arktis. Dem hohen Norden kommt dabei, das wissen Sie, eine besondere Bedeutung zu. Er ist gewissermaßen die Verbindung zwischen Nordmeer, Nordatlantik und Atlantik und damit ganz wesentlich, vor allen Dingen auch für die Versorgungswege zwischen Nordamerika und Europa. Das hat eine zentrale Bedeutung. Militärgeschichtlich, militärstrategisch wissen wir das seit dem Ersten Weltkrieg schon. Und die Tatsache, wer ist hier unterwegs, wer sichert für sich oder gegen andere diese Routen, ist von zentraler Bedeutung für die NATO-Staaten. Und deswegen ist Russland in der Arktis als stärkster maritimer Akteur etwas, womit wir uns beschäftigen müssen. Wir tun das auch seit Jahren schon. Und deswegen begrüße ich sehr, dass wir jetzt mit Arctic Sentry den nächsten Schritt machen. Als Bundeswehr waren wir wie andere NATO-Partner auch in der Vergangenheit immer wieder in der Arktis im Einsatz und haben dort geübt. Wir haben mit unseren Partnern an verschiedenen größeren und kleineren See- und Infanterieübungen teilgenommen. Und nicht zu vergessen die maritime Sicherheitspartnerschaft zwischen Kanada, Norwegen, Dänemark und Deutschland, von mir vor 1,5 Jahren initiiert. Wir sind mit Island im Gespräch. Viele Beteiligte interessieren sich für diese Partnerschaft, weil es eben um ein kooperiertes Vorgehen geht. Ich habe es gestern schon gesagt, Deutschland wird sich selbstverständlich an Arctic Sentry beteiligen. Wir haben dabei auch einiges zu bieten, wie Sie wissen, vom Seefernaufklärer P8 Poseidon, A400M, U-Boote, Fregatten, Eurofighter oder eben auch unsere Fähigkeiten zur Luftbetankung. Dann habe ich noch eine Mitteilung zu machen. Wir schauen heute nicht nur auf den NATO-Gipfel, meine Damen und Herren, sondern auch noch ein bisschen weiter. Sie wissen, dass im September die Spitze des NATO-Militärausschusses gewählt wird. Ich freue mich sehr, dass wir als Bundesrepublik Deutschland mit Generalinspekteur Carsten Breuer einen exzellenten Kandidaten für diesen Ausschuss haben. Gerade jetzt hat dieser ohnehin schon wichtige Vorsitz besondere Bedeutung. Und Deutschland und Europa haben in der NATO in den vergangenen Jahren erkennbar deutlich mehr Verantwortung übernommen. Und auch dafür steht General Carsten Breuer. Er hat in den vergangenen Jahren einen wesentlichen Beitrag dazu geleistet, die Verteidigungsfähigkeit Deutschlands voranzubringen. Ich arbeite ausgezeichnet mit ihm zusammen, sehr vertrauensvoll. Wir haben gemeinsam den Aufwuchs der Streitkräfte gewährleistet und die Fortschritte erzielt bei der Ausstattung der Soldatinnen und Soldaten. Auch hierbei war er ein wesentlicher Antreiber innerhalb der NATO. Auch das ist bekannt, hat sich General Breuer aufgrund seiner analytischen Fähigkeiten und seines Weitblicks gerade mit Blick auf die Bedrohungslage in Europa einen Namen gemacht und wird hoch geschätzt und hat deshalb zahlreiche Unterstützer. Ich bin sehr froh, dass ich mich mit dem Bundeskanzler und mit dem Außenminister dass wir sehr schnell darauf verständigt haben, Carsten Breuer zu nominieren. Das vielleicht auch von meiner Seite soweit. Und dann eine Bemerkung verbunden mit einer Bitte. Die Olympischen Winterspiele in Italien sind in vollem Gange. Und wer sich die deutschen Medaillenerfolge bis jetzt anguckt, der wird nicht umhin kommen festzustellen, dass entweder die Medaillen von deutschen Bundeswehrsoldaten, Sportsoldaten errungen wurden oder aber mindestens Bundeswehrsoldaten beteiligt waren an den Medaillen. Also keine Medaille, keine deutsche Medaille ohne Bundeswehr-Sportsoldaten. Was ich vermisse, ist in den deutschen Medien gelegentlich ein Hinweis darauf, dass es sich um Sportsoldaten handelt. Sie machen ihre Karriere bei der Bundeswehr, sie studieren oder machen eine Ausbildung. Und ich finde, Sie haben es verdient und die Bundeswehr auch, dass, so wie das in anderen Ländern auch üblich ist, darauf hingewiesen wird, dass es sich um Sportsoldaten handelt. Sie sind stolz darauf und ich bin es auch. Ich wäre Ihnen sehr dankbar, wenn Sie das gelegentlich berücksichtigen können.
Is Arctic Century to satisfy US concerns over, is Arctic Century going to be enough to address US concerns over Greenland?
Well, it's not only about US concerns. These are mutual concerns about the security of the Arctic. And it's not only about Greenland, it's about particularly about the Arctic. So I'm absolutely convinced, given the fact that the NATO is leading this operation, this mission, that it will be enough for everybody.
Inwiefern ist denn Arctic Century mehr als eine bloße Umbenennung von bereits existierenden Manövern und Übungen?
Weil es das schlicht nicht ist. Es ist keine Umbenennung von irgendetwas. Es ist mehr. Mehr Partner beteiligen sich. Und das ist gut so. Ich habe vor 2 Jahren, als ich in Norwegen war, schon auf die Bedeutung der Arktis für uns als NATO, aber auch als Europäer hingewiesen. Von daher ist es folgerichtig jetzt, dass die NATO das tut. Und ich freue mich sehr darüber, dass sich so viele daran beteiligen.
Halten Sie den Konflikt mit Grönland jetzt mehr oder weniger entschärft?
Ja.
Herr Minister, die Umstrukturierung der NATO vergrößert den europäischen Einfluss auch bei den Sternen, bei den Generalssternen. Was bedeutet das für Deutschland? Was ist da Deutschlands Rolle und was kostet das Deutschland?
Die Frage nach dem, was es kostet, interessiert mich eigentlich, wenn ich ehrlich bin, am wenigsten, weil wir hier über Notwendigkeiten reden, unsere Rolle in der NATO sichtbar zu machen. Das ist auch Wille der NATO-Partner. Deutschland ist die größte Volkswirtschaft in Europa und der größte NATO-Partner eben in Europa auch. Von daher ist es folgerichtig, dass in dem Maße, in dem sich amerikanische Streitkräfte aus bestimmten Kommandostrukturen zurückziehen und diese quasi an die Europäer gehen, dass dann eben auch Deutschland seinen Part spielt und das tun wir in Abstimmung mit den Partnern.
Minister, we've just seen the American Undersecretary sort of slip in as you were talking. Pete Hegseth isn't coming to this conference. Are you disappointed? And do you think that Europe actually needs to genuinely be ready to defend itself, maybe without America?
No, I'm not disappointed. I know everybody, each of us has a full agenda. And one time the American defense minister is here and one time not. So it is his decision and his duties he has to fulfill. Anyway, and the role of the United States when it comes to the conventional deterrence and defense in Europe is quite clear. The history shows us, the history of the last decades, that the US took a lion's share of what has to be done for the European conventional deterrence and defense. And now the time has come that Europeans take over more and more, step by step, in the years to come. This is absolutely normal and natural. I understand and I support this direction. The main thing from my perspective is NATO and USA are member of NATO and they will remain member of NATO. But to keep this, in order to keep NATO transatlantic, it is necessary to make it more European, to take over more European responsibility, and at the same time being able to rely and to trust, and this is what we do, on the nuclear deterrence which has been provided for decades by the US.
Herr Minister, der ukrainische Präsident hat gestern gesagt, dass es für die Ukraine ein konkretes Datum für einen EU-Beitritt brauche, damit die Ukraine einen Friedensvertrag unterschreiben kann. Ist das für die Bundesregierung denkbar, dass es so ein konkretes Datum wirklich gibt für den EU-Beitritt der Ukraine?
Ein konkretes Datum ist immer denkbar, aber welches soll das sein? Also darüber wird zu reden sein, das macht man nicht zwischen Tür und Angel.
What are your expectations of today's UDCG meeting?
My expectations are quite clear. We need more support for Ukraine. What we are seeing in Ukraine is attacks by Russia, which has nothing to do with military strategy. It's just terrorism against the civilian population of Ukraine. So it is necessary to ramp up the support for Ukraine in terms of self-defense, priority 1, and self-defense, priority 2. So this is what we need to talk about today. My colleague, the Foreign Minister of Germany, and me, Joe Wadefull, we signed a letter yesterday, the third letter with regard to that, to all our allies and partners to support Ukraine more intensively, and again to have a look in the own stockpiles for what we can do, and if there is nothing left in the stockpiles which can be provided to Ukraine, it's about giving money. So like we did last year, we achieved 1 billion euros last year for procuring more air defense for Ukraine, and this is what we are going for once more with our letter.
Gibt es irgendetwas Konkretes, was Sie sich von der Münchner Sicherheitskonferenz erhoffen, erwarten?
Jetzt sind wir erstmal beim NATO-Treffen hier in Brüssel. Wir haben eine volle Agenda heute. Die Münchner Sicherheitskonferenz beginnt dann morgen. Ich freue mich, viele Kollegen aus der ganzen Welt wiederzusehen und hoffe auf eine gute Atmosphäre, die ganz klar adressiert, worauf es jetzt ankommt. Nämlich, dass die Welt, die demokratische Welt, die Welt, die sich der internationalen regelbasierten Ordnung verpflichtet fühlt, geschlossen bleibt, sich nicht auseinandertreiben lässt und ein klares Commitment abgibt zur Sicherheit aller.
Sir, do you think that concerns by Romania and other Eastern allies that Arctic sentry could hurt Eastern sentry and the defense of the eastern flank, are they justified?
I can understand that because it's clear if something happens like that, everybody is maybe concerned about anything could be done left in another place. But there's no reason for that. These are different operations, different missions, and each of them will be fulfilled.
Vielen Dank für Ihre Fragen.
Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Lithuanian Minister of National Defense, Mr. Robert Askonas.
Good morning, everyone. As Lithuania's defense minister, I want to be clear. NATO has had too many wake-up calls. Lithuania leads by example. We invest 5.38% of GDP to our core military needs, the highest level in all NATO countries, because there are no alternatives. We invest not because we want war. We invest because we want peace, and peace requires real military capacities. I encourage all NATO countries to meet 5% of GDP next year. Putin will not stop by itself. He must be stopped, and he understands only language of strength. Thank you.
Good morning to see you all, and let me, by way of introducing, say, hey, I'm really looking forward to today's meeting with the defense ministers. It will be very much about the implementation of what we decided in The Hague, ramping up Canada and Europe when it comes to defense spending, across the alliance, making sure that the defense industrial base is producing the output we need to be able to deter and defend ourselves. And obviously Ukraine, where you just heard the good news from John Healey, the UK Defence Secretary of Defence, announcing £500 million in air defence, both bilateral and Pearl, for Ukraine. And this is really important because Ukraine, as you know, they are really staunch, they are fighting back, but they are also still hit with missiles, etc., on their civilian infrastructure and innocent civilians. So this is important. But what you see overall is a picture of Canada and Europe stepping up, spending billions more on defense, ramping up the defense industrial base, keeping Ukraine strong. So I think this is very important. We will take stock today and then chart out the course towards our summit in The Hague. So I take a few questions because we will see each other later today at the press conference. Sir.
Secretary General, there's Arctic Sentry, Baltic Sentry, Eastern Sentry, Steadfast Dart. Norway is doing a cold response. Has there ever been so many NATO exercises planned in such a precise period of time as we're seeing right now?
Well, thank you for that question, because I'm not sure it is more than, let's say, 10 or 20 years ago, but it clearly shows you that the threat is there. The long-term Russian threat is there. And we should not be naive, by the way, about China. And when it comes to the Arctic, it is not only Russia. It is also China. We know that sea lanes are opening up, so we have to defend the Arctic and bring it together. All these various initiatives. And then charting a way ahead, making sure that we identify the gaps which are there, and then making sure that we can fill the gaps, and taking into account all the latest technologies through our Allied Command transformation. There's exactly evidence that NATO as a whole, the US, Canada, the European allies, are working hand in hand together to make sure that we defend every inch of NATO territory. Yes, sir.
You said yesterday that the US administration is fully aware of the situation in Ukraine.
Yes.
So aren't you a bit frustrated by the lack of pressure this administration is putting on?
I think that is not fair. Of course, you can ask me any question, but I think the statement within the question is not fair. The US is putting every pressure on Russia, as the Europeans are doing, through the sanction packages. Look what has been happening with Lukoil and Rosneft and all the other stuff the US is doing. The US is still delivering crucial air defense and other lethal weapons into Ukraine through this Pearl program, so paid for by Canadian, European allies and partners. And the US is leading the peace effort. And there is only one country, the most powerful nation on earth, the US, which can do that under the leadership of President Trump, breaking the deadlock with Putin, getting the peace process going. So I really think the US is doing exactly what we need when it comes to Ukraine.
Greenland question off the table now.
Well, what I discussed in Davos, but also what we discussed within Europe with our partners in Canada, our allies in Canada and the United States, is that we have to defend the Arctic. This is Greenland, but also the whole Arctic. And the good news, I think, yesterday is with the launch of Arctic Sentry that we will now bring together all the assets which we have currently available in the Arctic, getting the whole picture, getting NORAD involved, US NORSCOM involved, EUCOM involved, and all the European allies together to make sure that we defend the Arctic against, as I said, the opening up of sea lanes, Russia increasingly active there, but also China.
Are you concerned, Secretary General, that this renewed focus on the Arctic could pull focus somewhat from NATO's eastern flank?
No, NATO is so strong that we can do both, and we have to basically have a 360-degree approach to any threat against NATO territory. And Eastern Sentry, making sure that our eastern flank is secure and strong, and we have seen the drone incursions in Poland early September. We have seen what happened in Estonia a couple of weeks later in September with the Mykh from Russia into Estonian airspace. So we have to make sure that we defend every inch of Allied territory. So Eastern Sentry is important, Baltic Sentry, making sure that we protect the undersea sea cables and critical infrastructure, but of course also the Arctic. And this is Greenland, but also the rest of the Arctic, Norway, Finland, Sweden, Denmark through Greenland, Iceland, Canada and the US, focusing of course primarily on the area where our Supreme Allied Commander is working with.
Sure. European allies are buckling up now for a while for the US posture review. Do you think Bridge Colby today will have a reassuring message that it won't be as bad, as big, as fast as expected?
Well, what I see happening over the last year is the US and Bridge Colby has been important here because he has always been an advocate of Europe stepping up. The US leadership team under the leadership of President Trump and Secretary Hagsett, Secretary Rubio, indeed also Under Secretary Colby, they have always consistently pleaded for Europe doing more, Canada doing more, taking more care of the defense of NATO territory, of course in conjunction with the United States. And I predict that longer term you will see, of course, the nuclear umbrella as the ultimate guarantor of our security here in Europe and Canada, but also a strong conventional presence of the US here in Europe, which is crucial. We all know this. And NATO is not only there to protect Europe and Canada, it's also there to protect the United States. And for the United States to be secure, you need a strong and secure Arctic, a secure Europe, but also a secure Atlantic. So we are in this together. This is how this alliance was founded 77 years ago in 1949. Final question, and then we'll see each other at the...
Are you expecting tension in the room today between Denmark and the US over Greenland, or have you managed to sort of ease the alliance through that crisis? And are you disappointed that Pete Hegseth isn't coming? Is that a signal that the US actually isn't that interested in its transatlantic bond?
Well, on the first question, what I'm seeing is that as an alliance, we came together to discuss this threat assessment when it comes to the Arctic, which is, yes, Greenland, but also the whole of the Arctic area, so including our new members, our new allies from Sweden and Finland, who bring a lot of experience when it comes to this. Take Norway, which has been in the alliance for so long, I think from the start, if I'm right, but Norway bringing this incredible experience and knowledge when it comes to the protection of the High North. I know this because Dutch Marines have always been training there, so not personally having that knowledge, but my brother and knowing my friends who were training there in cold weather conditions. So we have that collective experience in NATO that we have to defend the Arctic. This is what the Greenland discussion was about, but also the wider Arctic discussion is about. And I think with Arctic Sentry and the trilateral talks ongoing between Greenland, Denmark and the United States, this is all important to make sure that we prevent Russia and China from getting access, but also to protect the whole region. And when it comes to Secretary Hagsett, I mean, I'm in regular contact with him and all the senior officials in the United States. Of course, the American president, #1, the overall leader of the US, but also his whole foreign leadership and defense Secretary of War leadership team. But hey, they have to take care of the whole world. This is the United States. NATO is very important, but there is also the Western Hemisphere. There's also the Indo-Pacific. I totally accept it, agree with it. And I had dinner last night with Bridge Colby. I think he has been a consistent voice of, hey, Europe, do more. Because as the United States, we also have to pivot more towards the Indo-Pacific. Let's make sure that collectively we keep Europe strong and Canada and the United States, so NATO territory, but also make sure that we keep our eyes on the Indo-Pacific and not be naive about China. So having him today in the room, I think is really having added value. So I'm happy he is here. I totally accept Pete Hegseth also having to take care of all these other responsibilities. Thank you so much, and we will see each other later today at the presser around 3 o'clock. Yes. Thanks. Bye. let's start with the handshake. Okay. Hey, good morning again.
To see you. Yes.
Good to see you. Hi. Good morning. I'm really happy that Under Secretary for Brits Colby is here today. He has been a consistent voice over the years for Europe and Canada to really step up when it comes to defense spending, when it comes to defense industrial production. Absolutely acknowledging the fact that the United States, being absolutely committed to NATO, also has to take care of the situation in the Pacific and has to pivot over time more towards the Indo-Pacific. And therefore, Europe and Canada stepping up is really crucial. Of course, since President Trump was re-elected, the whole American leadership team, under the leadership of President Trump, has been pleading with NATO and European and Canadian allies to do more. And the good news is, the billions are coming in. I mentioned yesterday Germany spending in 2029 152 billion, 152 billion euros, which is double what they spent in 2021. So it is really happening. And that's crucial. So President Trump's leadership, Secretary Hagsted's leadership, your leadership in all of this is highly recognized. We are very happy to have you here today, sir, in the meeting, and we are really anxious to listen to you and have a great discussion. But again, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. It's an honor to be here to represent the Department of War and Secretary Hegseth. And I think I'll just reiterate what the Secretary General said with President Trump's and the Secretary General's historic leadership. I think 2025, you saw a reframing and a real genuine commitment because of the President's leadership and the SecGen's leadership to actually have a Europe that leads the conventional defense of NATO, which in a sense, as I'm going to say today, is really a return to NATO 1.0. This is a serious alliance focused on defense and deterrence, and it's greatly thanks to your leadership, Mr. Secretary General. And so I think this year we actually have a good message to say, which is now it's time to march out together, to be pragmatic, to be focused on the kind of flexible realism that the national security strategy and the national defense strategy are based on and really exhibit. And I think we have a really strong basis for working together in partnership, but putting NATO kind of a 3.0 NATO that's based a partnership rather than dependency, and really a return to what NATO was originally intended for.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay.
Good morning. Good morning, all of you, and welcome to this meeting of NATO defense ministers. Today we will address how we are further strengthening and adapting our deterrence and defense, and of course continuing our support for Ukraine. We are already seeing significant increases in allied defense spending. Investment is up by tens of billions. And we will review progress on the 5% defense investment commitment agreed in The Hague last year. We will discuss enhancing our deterrence and defense posture. That includes integrated air and missile defense, strengthening our command and control, improving our readiness, as well as our ability to deploy and sustain forces through host nation support. We will also take stock of our work to enhance the defense industrial base across the alliance, to ensure that our militaries have the capabilities they need to keep our people safe. All this is essential for our shared security across the alliance, from the south to the high north and Arctic, from the east to the west. NATO is always on duty to deter and defend. This is why we have just launched Arctic Sentry, giving Russia's increased military activity and China's growing interest in the high north. We will also discuss our continued support for Ukraine. As the United States continues to drive efforts to bring the war to a just and lasting end, Russia continues to pursue civilian targets, including energy infrastructure. So it is still essential that allies continue to step up support, including through NATO's Pearl initiative. It is ensuring that essential US equipment is delivered to Ukraine, paid for by allies and partners. This afternoon we will hold a meeting of the NATO-Ukraine Council. We will be joined by Defense Minister Mykhailo Fedorov, and he will brief us on the situation on the ground and on Ukraine's long-term needs. We will also be joined by the Office of the EU High Representative as we work closely with the European Union on Ukraine and, of course, on so many other issues. Ukraine's security is linked with our own. We must ensure that when this war ends, Russia will never try again to invade Ukraine. This concludes this public part of our meeting. I want to thank the media for joining us, which means, could you please leave the room? Thank you.
This is Channel 1, the English translation. This is Channel 1, the English translation. This is Channel 1, the English translation.